Her SUV slammed into the seaman's car as they turned into their driveway. Helene, a 60-year-old nurse and mother, lost her life instantly. Her husband Fred, a marketing executive and father, survived but with serious injuries. The once Hollywood actress Amy Locane was born in 1971 in Trenton, New Jersey. She grew up in a suburban neighborhood and showed early talent in acting. Before her downfall, she appeared in shows like Melrose Place and films such as Cry Baby and School Ties. Eventually, she stepped away from Hollywood, moved back to New Jersey, got married, and had children. Everything changed on one summer night in 2010. On June 27th, she left a wrap party for a community theater show and later went to a barbecue with friends. There, she drank both wine and beer. She later told investigators she thought she only had a few drinks. But when tested after the crash, her body substance level came back as 0.23%. That was nearly 3 times the legal limit in New Jersey. She was driving her sport utility vehicle at about 53 miles per hour in a 35-mile zone. At that moment, Fred and Helene Seaman were turning into their driveway. She struck their car. Helene passed away at the scene. Fred survived but suffered serious injuries. This was not her first dangerous move that night. Earlier, she had already hit a car at a traffic light. A witness said they tried to take her keys because she was slurring her words, and her eyes looked glassy. Instead of stopping, she sped away. Prosecutors later argued this showed she had been reckless even before the final crash. The question raised in court was whether this was a tragic accident or a choice made with disregard for others. The state argued it was the latter. By choosing to drive after drinking heavily, she put others at risk. Her defense admitted she had been drinking but tried to shift some responsibility elsewhere. They claimed another driver had distracted her and emphasized that she had no prior record. They also argued that a harsh sentence would harm her children. The case was moved to Somerset County, New Jersey. In December of 2010, she was indicted on several charges, including causing a fatal crash and endangering others on the road. Her trial began in October of 2012. More than 50 witnesses testified. Prosecutors built their timeline: the earlier collision at the light, the speeding, and then the final crash. Experts testified her intoxication level was well above the limit and said there was no way to excuse it. The defense presented witnesses of their own, but the jury was not convinced. On November 27, 2012, she was found guilty of second-degree vehicular homicide and assault by vehicle. She was cleared of the more serious charge of aggravated manslaughter. On February 14, 2013, she was sentenced. The guidelines called for 5 to 10 years, but Judge Robert B. Reed gave her only 3 years in prison. He cited her clean record, her role as a mother, and her children's welfare. The Seaman family was outraged. Fred Seaman told the judge, "Having a sick child doesn't give you a pass to take my wife's life." She began serving time at the Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women. She served about 2.5 years before being released on parole on June 12, 2015. But the case was far from over. In 2016, a New Jersey appeals court said her sentence was too lenient. The case was sent back for review. Judge Reed admitted he had made mistakes, but still refused to send her back to prison, pointing to her good behavior since release. In February of 2019, a new judge resentenced her to 5 years. She was freed on bail while her appeal continued, but higher courts again ruled that the new sentence did not meet their requirements. In July 2020, the matter went back for another review. On September 17, 2020, Superior Court Judge Angela Borkowski sentenced her to 8 years. The court ordered that she serve more than 6 years before parole. The judge said clearly, "You made a conscious decision to drink that day. If you hadn't gotten behind the wheel, this incident never would have happened." During that same hearing, she apologized to the Seaman family. But Fred Seaman responded that her earlier attempts to shift blame showed contempt for this court and the jury. Because she had already served some time, credit was applied. Her parole eligibility was set for December 2024. In 2022, she lost a federal appeal to reduce the state sentence. Finally, on December 20, 2024, she was released after completing her time. The next woman was once the face of glamour, until jealousy turned her into a defendant. Victoria Vetri was once known as one of Hollywood's classic beauties of the late 1960s. She worked as a model and actress, using names such as Angela Dorian and Victoria Rathgeb. She was born in San Francisco to Italian immigrant parents and grew up in California. She attended Hollywood High School and later studied art at Los Angeles City College. At the same time, she was building her career in modeling and acting. She appeared in films, on television, and in magazines. In 1968, she was chosen as Playmate of the Year under the name Angela Dorian. Her personal life included several marriages. At age 18, she married for the first time and had a son, but later divorced. She then married John Lee Hage, followed by Heinz Schwetz. In 1986, she married Bruce Rathgeb. That marriage lasted about 25 years. They eventually divorced while she was serving her sentence. The incident that changed her life took place on the evening of October 16, 2010. By then, she and Bruce had been married for about 25 years. Their relationship was troubled. In their West Hollywood apartment, they got into an argument. She accused him of being unfaithful. He denied it. Bruce tried to leave and walked toward the elevator. In that heated moment, Victoria pulled out a firearm and fired. The bullet struck Bruce near his chest area, from the back or side. Bruce later described what happened. He said he was facing the elevator when he smelled gunpowder, felt a sharp burning pain, and realized he had been hit. The bullet was so close to his heart that doctors could not safely remove it, leaving it inside his body. When he collapsed, Victoria pushed a plastic bag into his mouth before going back inside the apartment. Bruce was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, but he survived. Why did she do it? Prosecutors argued it was fueled by suspicion and jealousy. The defense initially claimed that someone else, possibly a stranger, had been responsible. But that version did not hold up in court. A neighbor named Michael Place testified that he heard Bruce say, "My wife just shot me," and also saw a plastic bag near the elevator. Bruce also told investigators that he had never been unfaithful during their marriage, saying, "25 years, I have never cheated on my wife. I have been true to her." The prosecution argued that the act was not accidental or defensive. They said it was intentional, pointing out that Bruce was walking away when the shot was fired. At first, prosecutors charged her with attempted taking of a life. She pleaded not guilty. Bail was set at about $1.5 million. The judge refused to lower it. Over time, the charge was reduced to attempted voluntary manslaughter after negotiations. In January 2011, a judge did not allow immediate reduction. But by September of that year, a plea agreement was reached. In court, the evidence included Bruce's testimony. He said she fired while he was about 8 feet away. There was also proof of gunpowder residue, the bullet's path, and the neighbor who saw him collapse near the elevator. The defense could not provide a strong explanation that matched the physical evidence. The courtroom was tense. A woman once admired for her looks was now facing punishment for an act of violence. Eventually, she pleaded no contest to attempted voluntary manslaughter. Under California law, this meant she did not directly admit guilt, but accepted the punishment. The judge sentenced her to 9 years in state prison. She was also ordered to pay $70,000 to the California Victims Restitution Fund. Bruce was in court during sentencing, but he did not make a public statement. She began serving her sentence at the age of 66. After several years, she applied for parole. In April 2018, at age 73, she was released. The next woman was America's favorite TV aunt, until the FBI showed up at her door. She was born Lori Ann Loughlin in Zsa Zsa, 1964, in Queens, New York. When she was still a child, her family moved to Long Island. Later, they settled in Hauppauge, New York. She grew up in a middle-class American household. Her parents encouraged her interest in acting. Over time, she became a well-known television actress. Many people recognize her as Rebecca "Aunt Becky" Katsopoulos from Full House and later Fuller House. But her fame did not protect her when she became involved in one of the most publicized scandals of the past few decades. Her actions were not harmful, but they shook people's trust in fairness. She became part of what was called the college admissions case, also known as Operation Varsity Blues. The plan itself was simple. Wealthy parents paid large sums of money so their children could be presented as athletes or high-achieving students, even if that was not true. This allowed those children to enter top universities, often at the expense of students who genuinely earned their place. Between 2016 and 2017, Loughlin and her husband, designer Massimo Giannulli, worked with a college admissions consultant named William Rick Singer. They arranged for their two daughters to be falsely presented as recruits for the University of Southern California's rowing team. In reality, neither daughter had ever trained in the sport. Emails showed Giannulli sending Singer photos of the girls on rowing machines. These pictures were meant to support a fake athletic resume. Giannulli also agreed to send charitable payments. These payments went to a false foundation called Key Worldwide Foundation, as well as to a USC athletics account. The payments were disguised as donations, but in truth, they functioned as bribes. The Department of Justice reported that Giannulli paid $50,000 to a USC athletics administrator's account and another $200,000 to Singer's foundation. These payments were made for each daughter's admission arrangement. At first, Loughlin denied wrongdoing, but in May 2020, she changed her position and admitted guilt to one count of conspiracy involving wire and mail fraud. Her husband admitted guilt to similar charges, including what is known as honest services fraud. Their motive was clear. They wanted their daughters to have the status and opportunities that come with a top university degree. They believed that wealth could make the system bend in their favor. Admission to USC or other elite schools not only gives access to education, but also to prestige, networking, and career opportunities. For them, the gamble was that the reward was worth the risk. The case did not go to a full jury trial. By admitting guilt, they avoided a long and highly public trial. On August 21, 2020, U.S. District Court Judge Nathaniel Gorton announced the sentencing. Loughlin received a 2-month prison sentence. She was fined $150,000. She was ordered to complete 100 hours of community service. In addition, she was placed on supervised release for 2 years. Her husband received a 5-month prison sentence. He was fined $250,000. He was ordered to complete 250 hours of community service. He also faced 2 years of supervised release. Loughlin began serving her time at the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California, on October 30, 2020. She was released on December 28, 2020. Her period of supervised release ended in December 2022. The next act happened during a traffic stop, until it spiraled into one of the most talked-about celebrity trials of the 1980s. Zsa Zsa Gabor was a Hungarian-born actress and socialite. She spent most of her adult life in the United States. She was born as Zsa Gabor in 1917, in Budapest. She became a naturalized U.S. citizen in 1949. Her life was full of headlines. She first gained attention by winning beauty pageants as a young woman. Then she moved to Hollywood. She went through a series of well-known marriages, and the media followed her almost everywhere she went. She came from a famous family. Her sisters, Eva and Magda, were also widely known. Their mother, Jolie, owned a jewelry shop in Budapest. The family lived in comfort before the war, moving in elite social circles. This background gave Zsa Zsa an early image of glamour, but also set the tone for a life filled with drama and public disputes. The moment most people remember when her name comes up happened in June 1989. On a sunny day in Beverly Hills, motorcycle officer Paul Kramer stopped her Rolls-Royce. The reason was expired registration tags. What started as a routine stop quickly grew tense. The officers began checking for other possible violations. Zsa Zsa drove away. Officers chased after her and pulled her over again. This time, things escalated. There were heated words. There was pushing. And then, Zsa Zsa slapped the officer. She later told reporters that she acted in self-defense. She claimed the officer had pulled her roughly from the car, but the officer insisted the slap was unprovoked. The entire incident, traffic stop, chase, and slap turned into a courtroom story that grew far beyond a simple violation, largely because of her celebrity status. At trial, a jury heard 2 very different versions of events. Some witnesses said it was a quick scuffle. Others described it as a sudden strike. The jurors had to weigh the word of an aging international star who said she had been mistreated against the word of a police officer who said he had been struck while doing his duty. In the end, the jury found Zsa Zsa guilty of battery on an officer. She was also found guilty of driving without a valid license and of having an open container of drinks in her car. She was cleared of the charge of failing to obey an officer when she drove off. These 3 misdemeanor convictions, battery on an officer, driving without a license, and open container, became the foundation of what the media called the cop slap case. The next step was sentencing. The public wanted to know what the court would decide. Ordinary traffic stops don't make news. But when a famous person is involved, every small detail becomes a question of fairness. Would she be treated the same as anyone else? The judge had options. He could have given a much harsher sentence. On paper, the charges carried more serious potential penalties. But Judge Charles G. Rubin balanced many factors. He considered her age, her reputation, and her charitable work. He also had to consider the jury's findings. On October 25, 1989, the judge sentenced her to 3 days in jail. She also had to pay fines and restitution totaling $12,937. She was ordered to complete 120 hours of community service, and she had to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Compared to the possible maximum penalties, the sentence was light, but it carried a huge impact on her public image. The humiliation and headlines stayed with her for years. She appealed at first, but later dropped the appeal and accepted the sentence. Still, she resisted some of the court's orders. She refused to do the community service. Instead, she chose to serve a 3-day jail term from July 27th to July 30th, 1990. Her time in jail, short as it was, challenged the idea that fame always shields people from consequences. Photographers captured every moment, from her walking into court to entering jail custody. Reporters quoted her sharp comments. At the trial, she had described the incident in strong words. After the verdict, she told reporters she was disappointed and that she can't believe it. At other times, she joked about her jail stay. Beyond this single criminal case, Zsa Zsa's life included other court battles. These were not criminal charges, but civil lawsuits. One of the biggest was her feud with German actress Elke Sommer. It started in the mid-1980s and turned into a massive libel case. Sommer claimed Zsa Zsa and her husband had made false and damaging statements in German publications. A jury awarded Sommer millions. At one point, the judgment totaled about $3.3 million in general and punitive damages. This huge financial hit pushed Zsa Zsa into bankruptcy and into years of legal struggles. It was not criminal punishment, but it had a devastating effect on her finances and her reputation. So, was Zsa Zsa a dangerous repeat offender? No. The record shows otherwise. She did not have a history of serious criminal convictions. What she did have was a pattern of disputes that often ended in court. The slap on the officer was her most visible criminal conviction. The libel lawsuit with Sommer was her biggest civil defeat. Both shaped the way the public saw her. Why did she act the way she did in Beverly Hills that day? Was it fear, anger, or a feeling that she didn't have to follow a routine stop? Accounts still differ. Zsa Zsa said she had been handled roughly and spoken to harshly. The officers said she resisted lawful authority. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. An uncomfortable moment spiraled out of control when both sides felt provoked. Her choice to use her hand against the officer changed the course of her public life. The trial itself felt like a performance as much as a legal process. Reporters filled the courtroom. Journalists turned a small street dispute into a debate about celebrity and the law. Every detail of her reaction, the way she gasped at the verdict, the way she spoke to cameras, became part of the story. The law, however, stayed focused. The jurors weighed the facts. They reached a decision based on whether they believed beyond a reasonable doubt that she had struck the officer and violated the vehicle rules. The punishment was light in terms of jail time, but heavy in financial cost and public embarrassment. Press reports gave plenty of details. The open container was a flask of Jack Daniels found in her Rolls-Royce. The driving charge came from an invalid license. The battery charge came from the slap itself. Both Zsa Zsa and the officers gave strong statements, each blaming the other. At sentencing, the judge tried to strike a balance. He wanted accountability, but he also took her age and her life history into account. Critics were divided. Some said she had been let off too easily. Others said the public humiliation was already punishment enough. In the years that followed, the slap remained the conviction most linked to her name. Other events, lawsuits, family conflicts, financial troubles, and health struggles filled her later life. She passed away on December 18, 2016, in Los Angeles at the age of 99. Up next is a world-class athlete, a glamorous actress, and a gun in the bathroom. And if you find stories like these important, consider subscribing. Claudine Longet was a French-born singer and actress. She became a familiar face in American entertainment during the 1960s and early 1970s. She was born Claudine Georgette Longet in 1942 in Paris. Later, she moved to the United States, where she recorded albums, appeared in small film and TV roles, and married entertainer Andy Williams in 1961. Their marriage ended in divorce in the mid-1970s. After her time in the spotlight, Claudine moved to Aspen, Colorado. She lived quietly there among skiers and wealthy residents. Everything changed on March 21, 1976. That afternoon, Vladimir "Spider" Sabic, a 31-year-old Olympic and World Cup skier, returned home after skiing. He shared the house with Claudine. According to her, Sabic was showing her how a small handgun worked. She said the weapon accidentally went off in the bathroom. The single shot struck Sabic in the stomach. He lost a large amount of body fluids, and Claudine stayed with him as he was taken by ambulance to Aspen Valley Hospital. He passed away on the way. The date and main outline of the events were widely reported and never disputed. The investigation and later trial focused on the details. Experts discovered that the pistol had a defective safety and that the firing mechanism had been heavily lubricated. This made it easier for the weapon to discharge without much pressure. Prosecutors argued that the evidence did not match Claudine's story of an accident. They pointed to the path of the wound and said Sabic seemed to have been bending forward and standing some distance away when the weapon fired. This position did not fit with the idea that he was showing her the gun at close range. The prosecution also wanted to use diary entries and other evidence to suggest their relationship was under stress. But the case was not only about forensic evidence. Local police made mistakes that weakened the case. They took a sample from Claudine and seized her diary without proper warrants. The court later ruled that these actions broke procedure. Because of this, key pieces of evidence were excluded at trial. Prosecutors said forensic tests indicated traces of white powder, and her diary contained signs of tension in her relationship. But because of how the evidence was collected, the defense successfully blocked much of it from being used. During the trial, Claudine's defense argued that the entire event was an accident. They described the gun as fragile and faulty. They claimed Sabic had been demonstrating its use when it went off. Her lawyers also reminded the jury of Claudine's fame and the intense media attention, saying it made fair judgment more difficult. After 4 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for about 3 hours and 40 minutes. They decided not to convict her of a serious felony such as reckless manslaughter. Instead, she was found guilty of the lesser charge of criminally negligent homicide, which was a misdemeanor under Colorado law. This charge carried a maximum penalty of 2 years in jail and a fine. However, the judge gave a much lighter sentence. Claudine received 2 years of probation, 30 days in jail to be served only on weekends, and a fine of just $25. Many people, including reporters, reacted with shock and disbelief. Why did it end this way? The mistakes in handling evidence, the unclear details of the weapon, and gaps in the prosecution's case all worked against a stronger conviction. The defense's accident story gave the jury a reasonable alternative. Since manslaughter required proof beyond a reasonable doubt, the jury settled on negligence instead. Later, the Colorado Supreme Court reviewed parts of the case and noted how police errors had harmed the prosecution's efforts. The human side of the trial was emotional. Sabic's life ended at 31, leaving his family grieving. Claudine faced intense attention from the press, who dug into her personal life, finances, and friendships. After the verdict, she remained outwardly calm. She made a short statement that was widely quoted. "I am not guilty. I have too much respect for human life to be guilty." Her time in jail was structured so she could serve on weekends and be home with her children during the week. Later, she married Ron Austin, a local attorney who had worked on her defense. Their relationship drew more attention from tabloids. Many people wondered if she escaped full accountability. Legally, she was convicted of a misdemeanor, but in the court of public opinion, many believed justice had not been fully served. In May 1977, Sabich's parents filed a civil case against Claudine. They claimed wrongful loss of their son. In September 1979, the case was settled privately. Reports said the agreement included a condition that Claudine would never publicly discuss the events. This confidentiality kept many details from ever being made public. In the end, Claudine faced only a short jail term, a small fine, and probation. The family of Vladimir Spider Sabich accepted a private settlement, which closed the case legally, but left many questions in the public's mind. The next woman taught martial arts, starred in Doctor Strange, and hid a dark secret that shocked a courtroom. Zara Phythian was known in martial arts circles and had a small acting role in the 2016 Marvel film Doctor Strange. She trained in martial arts, taught students, and even ran her own school. On the surface, she was an instructor and performer, but in court, a very different picture of her life was revealed. Testimony described years of inappropriate behavior that began when a young girl was still a child. The court heard that this behavior was not a one-time incident. It happened many times over several years, and the jury eventually found Phythian guilty on multiple counts. Prosecutors said the behavior started when the girl was about 13 years old. It continued through her mid-teens. Witnesses and the girl herself described repeated encounters, and the court was shown interviews, statements, and other details. The events were said to have taken place mainly between the years 2005 and 2008. The girl explained that it happened on many different occasions. Jurors also heard how Phythian and her husband were in a position of influence over her, which made it easier for the behavior to begin and to continue. Evidence shown at trial included witness accounts, forensic details, and recordings. The girl described times when substances were given to her and when Phythian encouraged certain acts. She said she felt trapped, knowing what was happening was wrong, but not knowing how to escape as a teenager. Prosecutors explained this as a pattern of grooming. It began with attention, gifts, or approval, then slowly moved into pressure and control. The girl also spoke about threats and strict instructions. The repeated nature of the behavior and the couple's influence over her were central points in the case. Why did this happen? The trial did not show a motive like money or revenge. Instead, the picture given in court was of a household where the older partner had strong influence. Judge Mark Watson told the court that he believed Phythian's actions were shaped by her husband. He said the husband was the driving force behind the behavior and that it appeared to have been planned. While that did not excuse her part in it, the judge said it helped explain how a woman in her 20s became involved in actions against someone so much younger. The case reached court years later, when the complainant decided to come forward. Separate complaints had also brought more information into focus. Investigators pieced together timelines and identified the couple as instructors who had been involved with the girl. The case went through a full police investigation before moving to Nottingham Crown Court. Over several days, the jury listened to recorded interviews, live testimony, and supporting accounts. The defense denied parts of the evidence and argued against the version presented by prosecutors. Phythian herself denied some of the claims, saying no inappropriate contact had taken place. After weighing both sides, the jury decided that the prosecution had proven the case. In the courtroom, emotions were high when the verdict was read. Reports said the couple hugged, and Mark cried after hearing the guilty decisions. Phythian, however, appeared calm in the dock. The jury found her guilty on 14 counts. Jurors accepted details that showed repeated acts, sometimes with threats and pressure. One account even described Mark pretending to be asleep before joining a planned incident. The judge later said that detail showed pre-planning. The jury's decision made clear they believed the events were not isolated mistakes, but repeated actions carried out over time. At sentencing, Judge Watson spoke directly to the couple. He said the behavior was clearly planned and had lasted over many years. He described Mark as the driving force and Phythian as someone influenced by him. The judge gave Phythian an 8-year prison sentence. Mark was given a longer term. The judge stressed that the victims were very young and that the repeated nature of the actions made the case extremely serious. After the sentence was announced, Phythian was immediately taken into custody. The victim's recorded police interview was also shown in court. In it, she explained how trapped she felt. She said, "I knew it was wrong, but I just didn't know how to get out of the situation or say anything." That statement was a key part of the prosecution's case. It explained why the girl had not reported what happened earlier. The court also heard that one of the victims was able to describe a tattoo on Phythian, which the defense could not disprove. This, along with the victim's testimony and other supporting evidence, became the backbone of the prosecution. After sentencing, the story drew widespread attention. Media outlets noted how surprising it was that someone with a public face as an actress and instructor had been living such a double life. Phythian was sent away to serve her sentence, while Mark faced even longer behind bars. The judge's words and the sentences given showed the court's view that the harm was severe and lasting. The next former child star was Disney's golden child, but courtrooms, mugshots, and ankle monitors turned her story into tabloid history. Lindsay Lohan grew up in the spotlight. She started acting as a child, moving from commercials to movie sets with ease. Born in 1986, she was known early on as a talented and hardworking kid who could carry a role and sell a film. But as she grew older, the headlines began to change. Her personal struggles and legal problems started to dominate her public image. Her family life was also complicated. Her parents separated, and their disputes often played out in the press. That background of stress, mixed with constant attention from the media, became part of the story the world watched as her troubles unfolded. Her record with the law is well documented. It included repeated cases of driving while impaired, possession of substances, probation violations, a highly publicized jewelry case, many court appearances, and court-ordered treatment programs. These weren't rumors or exaggerations. They were official events that shaped her adult life. The first major legal trouble came in 2007. That summer, she was taken into custody on suspicion of driving under the influence. Not long after, she faced another incident where she was accused of having white powder. She later admitted to misdemeanor substance use and entered a no-contest plea to reckless driving and driving under the influence. Her sentence included probation, community service, a short stay in jail, and mandatory substance education classes. These early events set a pattern that would repeat for years. Probation meant strict rules. She had to attend weekly education classes and report to the court regularly. The problem was she didn't always meet those requirements. She missed hearings and classes more than once. Judges became increasingly frustrated. Each violation, whether a missed class or a failed test, added up. The court saw these not just as personal setbacks, but as direct violations of court orders. In 2010, one of the most widely covered moments happened. A Beverly Hills judge ruled that she had repeatedly violated the terms of her probation from the 2007 case. The judge sentenced her to 90 days in jail, followed by another 90 days in an inpatient rehab facility. In court, she spoke emotionally and promised to turn things around. But the judge pointed to her pattern of non-compliance. Because of overcrowding in the jail system, she served only a fraction of that time behind bars. She was then moved to complete treatment in rehab. This showed how the legal system often balanced punishment with rehabilitation, especially for public figures. But it also showed how media attention made her legal struggles harder to escape. Then in 2011 came the necklace case. This was one of her most serious legal challenges. A Venice, California jewelry store reported a missing necklace valued at about $2,500. Store surveillance and statements led to a felony grand theft charge. Lohan at first pleaded not guilty. The case went through multiple hearings and pretrial discussions. The prosecution argued that her actions showed theft. Her defense said she had no intent to steal. Eventually, the charge was reduced to a misdemeanor. She entered a no-contest plea to a lesser offense and received community service, probation, and more jail time tied to probation violations. Once again, overcrowding meant she served very little actual jail time. Part of the sentence was completed under house arrest with an ankle monitor. But this case added another layer to her already complicated legal history, making her court appearances a regular headline. Why did these incidents keep happening? There's no single answer. Addiction, pressure, and poor decision-making all played a role. Court papers showed repeated failed tests and missed treatment sessions. Her work schedule and constant media coverage made it even harder to stick to programs. The court, however, responded only to the facts: missed classes, failed tests, and broken probation terms. Each violation created new legal consequences. By this point, courtrooms became a regular part of her life. Lawyers worked out plea deals, judges tightened or relaxed probation terms, and prosecutors decided whether to reduce or pursue charges. Some charges that could have brought lengthy sentences were reduced to misdemeanors. Other times, judges imposed stricter penalties when they felt she wasn't taking the process seriously. The 2010 jail and rehab order came after repeated warnings. The 2011 necklace case was eventually downgraded, but still carried heavy consequences. Every court appearance added to a long legal history that showed both how far the justice system could go and how plea deals shaped the outcomes. Up next is a TV star, a phony charity, and an SAT test at the center of a nationwide scandal. Felicity Huffman was born in 1962 in Bedford, New York. Her mother was Grace Val, and her father was Moore Peters Huffman, a banker. Her parents separated when she was young. She grew up with her siblings, first in New York and later in Colorado. As a teenager, she learned that her biological father was actually a family friend. This discovery added confusion and complexity to her early life. Felicity eventually focused on acting. She trained in theater and later built a career in television and film. Her most recognized role came as Lynette Scavo in Desperate Housewives. The wrongdoing she was later connected to was not one of physical harm. It was a case of dishonesty. It involved taking advantage of a system that is supposed to be based on fairness. In 2019, she was linked to the large Varsity Blues college admission scandal. This investigation revealed how wealthy parents used unfair methods to help their children get into top schools. What exactly did Felicity do? She admitted to being part of a plan involving false test scores. She worked with Rick Singer, who was known as a college consultant, but secretly ran a network that helped parents cheat the system. Starting in 2017, Felicity took steps to raise her daughter's SAT score. She arranged for her daughter to take the test at a location under Singer's control. There, a proctor quietly changed some of her daughter's answers after the test. Felicity also secured extended time for her daughter to complete the exam. To make this possible, she misled her daughter's school counselor. She told the counselor her daughter was testing at another location on a weekend, claiming it would minimize missed class time. To fund this plan, Felicity paid $15,000. The money was made as a donation to Singer's charity, the Key Worldwide Foundation. In reality, the organization was a cover used to hide payments. Why did she do it? Later, Felicity explained that she acted out of fear. She was worried her daughter would not keep up with others. She felt she was not doing enough as a parent. She said the competition for college was harsh, and she panicked. Still, this did not excuse her actions. The court saw her decision as a way of using wealth and influence to gain an unfair advantage. The legal case moved quickly. On March 13, 2019, prosecutors announced charges against her as part of the wider investigation. She was one of more than 50 people facing accusations. On April 8th, Felicity agreed to plead guilty to one count of conspiracy related to mail fraud and honest services fraud. On May 13th, she stood in federal court and formally entered her guilty plea. In court, she was emotional. She apologized and admitted she had been wrong. She told the judge she had no excuse and was prepared to accept the consequences. Judge Indira Talwani oversaw the case. Prosecutors first suggested 1 month in custody, along with supervised release and a fine. The judge instead gave her 14 days in custody, 1 year of supervised release, a $30,000 fine, and 250 hours of community service. On September 13, 2019, she received her sentence. On October 15th, she reported to the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California. She served 11 days out of the 14-day term. She was released 2 days early because her official release date fell on a weekend. During sentencing, she spoke directly to the court. She said, "I broke the law. I have admitted that, and I pleaded guilty to this act. There are no excuses or justifications for my actions. Period." She also said, "I want to apologize again to my daughter, my husband, my family, and the educational community. I was frightened, I was stupid, and I was wrong." The next woman played a hero on Smallville, but in real life, she became a recruiter for a dangerous cult. Allison Kristen Mack was born in 1982 in Preetz, West Germany. Her parents were Jonathan and Mindy Mack. Her father worked as an opera singer, and her mother was a school teacher. When Allison was still a child, her family moved to Long Beach, California. She grew up in what seemed like a safe and ordinary home. Allison began acting at a very young age. She started in commercials and then moved into television and film. By her late teens, she landed the role of Chloe Sullivan on the superhero series Smallville. She appeared in almost every episode for 10 years. Fans admired her, and she built a loyal audience all around the world. But away from the spotlight, a troubling story was beginning to develop. That story began when Allison became involved with a group called NXIVM, run by a man named Keith Raniere. NXIVM presented itself as a self-help organization. It offered courses on leadership, discipline, and empowerment. Many professionals, actors, and entrepreneurs were drawn to it. Around 2006, Allison first attended workshops after being introduced by friends. At first, she liked the group's message about personal growth, but soon her involvement grew into something much more harmful. NXIVM was not an ordinary self-help group. It was a manipulative cult built on control and secrecy. Raniere used his influence to draw women into an inner circle. That inner circle had a secret subgroup called DOS. The name came from a Latin phrase that meant master over slave women. Inside DOS, Allison's role shifted. She went from being a follower to becoming an enforcer. She helped bring new women into the subgroup under the promise of empowerment. But once inside, those women were pressured to give what the group called collateral. This meant handing over private material such as personal confessions, intimate photos, or even property rights. This material was used to keep them obedient and silent. Women inside DOS were branded with a cauterizing tool. The mark secretly included Keith Raniere's initials. Allison was present at many of these ceremonies. She sometimes stood by as women cried from the pain. She told them the brand was a symbol of strength and loyalty. Why would Allison, someone with money and fame, take part in something like this? The answer lies in Raniere's psychological grip. Allison later admitted she thought she was helping women grow stronger by forcing them to endure pain and strict obedience. She said she was broken and lost at the time, looking for meaning. Raniere took advantage of that. Still, it does not erase the fact that she pressured women, including close friends, into harmful obedience. She directed them to follow strict diets, accept sleep deprivation, and submit to Raniere in intimate ways. By 2017 and 2018, the truth about NXIVM began to surface. Journalists reported on the branding ceremonies, and former members shared their painful experiences. The public, once seeing NXIVM as a quirky improvement group, now viewed it as a cult. In April 2018, Allison was taken into custody in Brooklyn, New York. She faced charges related to trafficking and forced labor. Many were shocked to see the actress once known for playing a strong character, now standing in court beside Keith Raniere. The trial was long and difficult. At first, Allison pleaded not guilty. She stood by Raniere, but more evidence kept coming out. Emails, recorded conversations, and testimonies from former members revealed the truth. Women spoke about being branded, about handing over their darkest secrets, and about being pressured to obey Raniere. Allison's role as recruiter and enforcer became clear. In April 2019, Allison changed her plea to guilty. She admitted to racketeering and conspiracy. In court, her voice shook as she spoke. She said she believed she was helping women, but now understood the harm she caused. She told the judge, "I must take full responsibility for my conduct." She also apologized to the women she hurt. Investigators believed Allison's motive was not only loyalty to Raniere, but also a hunger for influence. Inside NXIVM, she rose to one of the top positions, second only to Raniere. She held power and status, but it came at the cost of those she recruited, who suffered pain and humiliation. At her sentencing in June 2021, Allison faced the possibility of many years in prison. Prosecutors argued for a serious punishment, pointing to her deep involvement. Her lawyers asked for leniency, saying she had cooperated with authorities and later rejected Raniere. Former members spoke in court, describing how they still lived with emotional scars. Allison cried as she listened. The judge sentenced her to 3 years in federal prison, along with a $20,000 fine and 1,000 hours of community service. She began serving her sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California. At sentencing, Allison gave her most direct apology. She said, "I am sorry to those of you that I brought into NXIVM. I was lost, and I believed that I was doing something good. But I see now that I was not." Allison was released in July 2023, after serving just under 2 years. The Bureau of Prisons said it was because of good behavior and her cooperation with investigators. Her release was controversial. Some said her sentence was too short, considering the suffering of victims. Others believed she too was manipulated by Raniere and deserved a second chance. Today, in 2025, Allison is 43 years old. She lives in California, far from her Hollywood career. Her name is remembered less for her role on Smallville and more for her involvement in NXIVM, the cult that shocked the world with its branding ceremonies and manipulation.